The Wisconsin National Guard says military police reinforcements from 3 other states are heading to Kenosha. That's in response to ongoing protests over another police shooting of a black man, Jacob Blake. The Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation into the incident. Demonstrations were mostly peaceful last night in Kenosha, Oakland, California, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. There are reports some individuals did loot and damage property. The protests have been a focal point of the Republican National Convention. Last night, Vice President Mike Pence reinforced the president's message of, quote, law and order. What's largely been missing from these speeches is a mention of the root cause of the demonstrations, calls for racial justice. Joining me now to talk about the intersection of race and politics is Rukia Lumumba. She's the co-director of the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives, as well as the co-producer of the Black National Convention, which kicks off tomorrow. Rukia, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
So before we talk about your convention, I would like to ask you about the Republican National Convention. Have you been watching it? And if so, what's your take on how the GOP is approaching the issue of race?
Yeah. So I've absolutely seen the Republican National Convention and very disappointed in how they're talking about race. What we see is that they consistently criminalize Black life, Black people, and our attempts to actually obtain justice in this country. I mean, only a few days ago, we saw the horrible, merciless shootings of Jacob Blake and Trayford, Pellenier. And what we saw is an attempt to literally criminalize the protesters that have been out in the streets, literally forcing their way to demand that we have justice for these shootings. You know, Jacob and Trayford are not the first Black people to have been shot or injured or killed at the hands of individuals in law enforcement. And justice for them means ending state-sanctioned violence against our community. It means removing weapons of war from American streets. It means that protesters who have been tear gassed and police who, instead of de-escalating tensions, arrived in SWAT gear in armed vehicles. You know, all of this horribleness towards people who literally, similar to what we saw in 1964 and the 1960s, fighting for civil rights, we see a fight for human rights today. We see a fight for life. We see a fight for Black lives, and we want to see some justice, and the RNC is not acknowledging that Black lives are in danger, and that it's in danger due to a system of policing that has consistently harmed our people over and over and over again. And it's time for it to be eliminated. It's time to defund and to create a better system of justice, a better system of safety, of community safety.
As you know, the RNC has featured some speakers who are Black making the case for President Trump's reelection, and one of them is civil rights activist Clarence Henderson, who spoke last night. He touted President Trump's record on Black issues, citing the president's introduction of Opportunity Zone investment in 2017 and his signing of bipartisan bills for HBCU funding and the First Step Act, legislation aimed at reforming the criminal justice system. I want to play some of what Henderson had to say. Let's listen.
These achievements demonstrate that Donald Trump truly cares about Black lives. His policies show his heart. He has done more for Black Americans in 4 years than Joe Biden has done in 50.
What's your reaction to Henderson's comments?
I mean, I think the comments are out of touch with reality. You know, we have seen renewed and even more aggressive voter suppression efforts all over the country, which target voters of color and particularly Black voters and people who were formerly incarcerated. That's what we've seen during the Trump administration. We've also seen a significantly less voter participation by low-income people, people of color, and young people, compared to a higher rate of participation by older and more affluent white voters. As a result, the demographics of our elected officials during the Trump administration have become disproportionately older, whiter, and wealthier than the actual electorate. You know, we've seen RNC elected officials use COVID, for example, COVID-19, this pandemic, as yet another tool of suppressing the Black vote. We saw it in Wisconsin, We're seeing a lot of horrific things in Wisconsin, where voters in Black majority precincts in Milwaukee were forced to wait hours because of limited open policing stations. Many subsequently tested positive for COVID. So I think what we're seeing is that the actual reverse of what, Mr. Henderson shared with us today. We're not seeing any new movements towards additional civil rights. We're actually seeing our civil rights being further hindered and taken away from us.
Let's talk about the Black National Convention, which is about 24 hours away. What will that look like? Who's speaking? And what do you want viewers to take away from it?
Oh, the Black National Convention is really an opportunity for us to take all that our frontline communities are protesting on the streets and putting it into practice, into policy, and moving us beyond just voting, but actually creating a strategy to see systemic change in our communities locally and at the federal level. So the Black National Convention is tomorrow, August 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is held by the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. We are super excited about this. This is the first time in over 40 years that we've seen a convention of this kind come to fruition again, to reach the mass number of people, of Black people and our allies that we're hoping to get. Together, what we hope to do during the Black National Convention, what we're charged to do, is to launch a Black political agenda. Days after what we've seen happen at the Democratic National Convention and the Republican National Convention, and ahead of November. We want Black voters. We know that Black voters will play a pivotal role in determining what the next 4 years will look like. And so we want to make sure that the Black National Convention puts forth an agenda that the people have requested over and over and over again. So we have taken years of protests on the street. We have taken the energy that we've seen from protests on the street. We have literally taken 500 delegates from 22 states of Black people across the nation, and we've come together to ratify an agenda that speaks to the needs and wants of Black Americans.
Rukia Lumumba. Rukia, thank you very much for sharing your perspective with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.